when it comes to this, it's a very, very, very useful tool, okay? Because it is showing you clearly what is happening on one attribute at a time in your whole animation, okay? So here we're only looking at our character one pose at a time, right? But here we can kind of say that each one of these keys is a visual representation of each time it has moved, okay? So here we're looking at all of our poses at once. So we can, even though this movement or this line isn't necessarily an indication of what, or like a direct indication of what or how this object is moving, it is showing us its relation to previous and following frames. Okay, so for instance, just by looking at this graph and observing what the character is doing, this is the Y translation. If you look there, the Y translation is movement in this direction, so forward and backward movement of this. And again, the easiest way to identify what a particular curve is doing is by moving one of the keys. So if you move it up or down, always when you're adjusting keys in the graph editor, I would suggest pressing the shortcut keys of G for grab and then Y for Y axes. Okay, so up and down. We only want to move things up and down in this editor. Okay, otherwise we're moving it in time as well. We don't want to adjust where our keyframes are. We just want to adjust the values, and the values lie on the Y axes of this graph. Okay, so this is telling us one thing. One particular thing, and that is that our character is moving at a constant speed, okay, in the Y translation. Now, I know that because this line is straight. Okay, in the graph editor, if a line is straight, it means there is no change in the speed. Okay, it is moving at a constant speed. So I can see that by looking over here and saying that over these 3 frames, okay, so let's do this, I think. How do I do it? Okay, there. Okay, so I'm going to make a little triangle. So over those 3 frames in time, the value is changing by a certain amount. Okay, and that value is, if I press N to open this up, 0.134 meters in a negative direction, which is that way. Okay, over the next 3 frames, it is moving also 0.134 meters. So that distance is the same as that distance. So if those distances are the same over the same amount of time, it means it is moving at a constant speed. Okay, it's high school vectors, pretty much. When this line is flat, it means there is no change in speed. Okay, so over here, we can scrub there. There's no movement, and that means that a flat line here means something has stopped. Okay, doing whatever this graph does. So here, this object has stopped moving in the Y location. So that means in the Y axis this way. Okay, so that's, I mean, that should all make sense to you. Okay, so for instance, the biggest problem with the walk cycles at this point is that this line isn't consistent. So for instance, a lot of you will have Sena curves that look like this. Okay, and when we scrub through it, we have inconsistent movement in this axis. Okay, so for instance, over here, if your graph looks like this and it feels like it's not moving at a constant speed, this is telling you exactly why. So for instance, over here, that graph is moving at, or that object is moving at a constant speed, the same constant speed, and suddenly it's becoming more flat. So there we know it is moving less, okay, to the point where it's almost not moving over that same time. Okay, then all of a sudden it's moving a lot quicker, and then it's moving less, and then faster, and then still faster. Okay, so here we can clearly see how our keys are moving. Okay, and if we know that this is supposed to be a straight line, we can very easily over here, without even adjusting anything in the viewport itself, go and fix our animation by making this curve more like we expect it to be. Okay, so how do we go about doing that? Okay, so if we know that this is now straight, then we know that our character is moving at a constant speed again. Okay, and this curve, this particular Y translation curve, it's still the biggest problem with 90% of everyone's animation. Okay. If I show an example with the 180-degree turn, which mine is still in blocking, so let me just put it into, sorry, that is the right one. It's turned around already. So let me just put this into my graph editor, select all my controls, select all my keys, and just put everything into Bezier so that it is now smooth. Okay, so if we're looking at this, now there's slightly, well, there's going to be a different curve that we can expect. Okay, so remember, home is the button that we need to adjust. Okay, so here we have something that we can adjust. Okay, so on this curve, there's different things that we can now see happen. So the same thing for the walk cycle that we had in the walk cycle, which should be the same in everyone's animation, is that the Y translation, which is the forward and backward movement, as we've said, should be moving at a constant speed. Okay, when you're walking, generally walk at the same speed, unless you're slowing up or speeding, slowing down or speeding up. Okay, which is exactly what we're doing after this. So for this first section, this should be a straight line. Okay, so immediately, since I know that that key is wrong, because that is slowly, well, it's easing into that motion. We want it to just start moving. So I'm going to change the vector handle of this, or the tangent handle, to vector. Okay, so press V and switch that. So there I know it's moving at a constant speed all the way up until there, more or less. Okay, then we know a few things. While this character is turning around, he should ideally slow down until he stands still. Okay, so if you're walking and you stop, you need to slow down so that you can stop. Kind of makes sense. Okay, so if we have a straight line over there and we have a flat line over there, for him to slow down, we need to smoothly go from straight line to flat line, which means we're going to have a gentle curve. Okay, now what I need to adjust on this curve to get this character to slow down more smoothly, because basically what's happening over there is he's going at a constant speed, and then that line is a very, like, it's not a very subtle, smooth blend between that angle and that angle, right? So there he's going to move at a constant speed, and suddenly change speed to a different constant speed, and then suddenly stop. So if I want this whole thing to be a little bit smoother and a little bit neater, I need this change from that speed to no speed to be a gentler curve. So it needs to be a little bit neater. Okay, so I can clearly or easily do that by just adjusting some of these keys. Okay, so for instance, if we pull those up a little bit, okay, and then pull these ones down a little bit more, and space this out if it makes it easier. And ideally you should do this while you're actually observing what it's doing. Okay, you shouldn't just do it without, like what I'm doing now. So you should move to that frame and go and check and see what it's doing. But ideally you want this to be a nice rounded curve. Okay, so if we do something more like that, which isn't too bad, so you can see it's got like a very subtle hockey stick shape, kind of. We can then know that it's moving at a constant speed and then slowly stopping. Okay, now this, as I said, is the biggest issue in most people's animation, that there's still a very jerky forward and backward movement. And to fix it for the turn, we know that while it's moving, it should be at a constant speed and then slowly and gradually come to a standstill. So if you do that, that should fix most of your animation. However, this could break your feet, in which case you need to update your feet to match the position of your upper body. Okay, so that's the biggest thing that's still happening. The other biggest thing that's still happening, which I'm quite certain will still be happening quite a lot, is that particularly on each of these turning poses, that you guys aren't adjusting your character's weight properly yet. Okay, and that's just simple walk cycle mechanics that we need to translate into this turn. Every time your character picks his foot up, his weight, where the upper body is in relation to the feet, will be more over the foot that's still on the ground. Okay, so for instance, if he picks that foot up, the character's body isn't still going to be there. Okay, as soon as you do that, you're going to have these very like disconnected feet from your body. It's going to feel like the feet aren't like working with the body. However, as soon as you have a pose where your character picks up his foot and shifts his weight onto the other foot, it's going to feel far more connected, like an actual body moving. Okay, so what you need to do is on each of your key poses, okay, so each of these, look at it from all angles, right? Look at it all around and see where is your character's weight situated. And ideally it should be, if both feet are on the ground, it should be distributed evenly over those 2 feet. If one foot's in the air, it should be favoring at least the foot that's still on the ground. Okay, so on each of these poses, go and make sure that that is balanced. Okay, yes, it is a moving object. Okay, so it's not always going to be directly over that foot. It's still going to have momentum and be moving in the direction. But as a pose, it should feel like it's still mostly balanced on the foot which is standing on the ground. Okay. So weight is shifting, so it's not always going to be on that foot. So for instance there, it has to move in that direction. It's not going to wait until that foot's firmly on the ground before it's going to carry on moving. We catch ourselves with each foot that we put down. Okay, so those are the 2 things that I want you guys to check so long. Make sure that your Y translation is doing what it should be doing. So when it's moving at a constant speed, that line should be straight. If it's slowing down, it should gently come to a stop. Okay? And then in terms of the weight of your characters in all your exercises, okay, the same mechanics apply. If your character picks his foot up, okay, so picks his foot up over there, the weight should be shifted onto the foot that's on the ground, and the hips should rotate in that direction as well. Okay, when he puts it down and picks the other foot up, all of our up poses, weight's going to be, hips are going to be rotated, weight's going to be on top of that foot. Okay, makes sense. Okay, the other thing also, a lot of you tend to pick your feet up a lot. Okay, so on your up poses, your feet are like up in the air, which immediately it's going to make it feel like very duck-footed, as if your character's walking with like flippers on. Okay, because it doesn't need to. As soon as you like over-exaggerate just one control, so you're not picking your foot up that high, but also, you know, really compensating for the other one, or compensating for that movement in the rest of your pose, it's going to feel out of place. So you're picking your feet up way too high, and also, in the same sentence, when you guys tend to pick your character's feet up, a lot of you don't rotate your ankle. So you pick your foot up, but you leave your foot flat, okay, which immediately feels uncomfortable. The angle between your shin and the top of your foot tends to be a little less than 90 degrees almost always, okay? So it's very seldomly, unless we have like a really good ankle mobility, that is comfortable for a character. So if you pick your foot up, generally you want to dip your toe. Okay, your ankle stays relaxed when you pick your foot up, in which case your toe will drop a lot. So don't pick your foot up and not rotate it. So that isn't wrong, that is more correct. Okay, so every time you pick your foot up, remember that that toe is going to dangle a little bit. Okay, we're never going to have flat feet in the air. It's always going to be rotated. Cool. Any questions on that? Wakey wakey. Cool. There you get 2 videos. Bonus.